Hi Marty folks, this is Elina. Today we're talking about how to structure your doctoral proposal, which is your doctoral exposé if you are applying for a doctorate degree in the arts. As many of you may know, I'm working on my doctorate degree in artistic research. I'm a practicing artist, I'm a musician, I'm a photographer, and this year I was on the doctoral committee as a representative from the student union. So I was reading through the 20 doctoral proposals for the upcoming school year, in addition to writing my own for the other year when I was applying. So I was on the selection panel and I got to view how it all functions from the inside. Let's take a look at it. So just a side note, there are about 70 inquiries in total this year for the doctoral school of artistic research at the University of Music and Performing Arts Graz in Austria, and at the end there are about exactly 20 applications. All of these people have got to go from two potential supervisors, one scientific supervisor and one artistic supervisor. Without these approvals, one cannot apply to the Kunstunikat, at least. So in order to proceed to the next round, which is the interview round after you have submitted all your documents, you have to structure your proposal in a specific way. And I will explain what I mean. So it has to be clear, long story short. But what does it really mean in detail? My very first tip: give yourself time. Enough time. As you may know, my personal proposal took me about 5 months to write, from the first outline, jotting down the ideas, and to the moment when I submitted it to the schools I applied to. If your proposal is written as a class term paper in a few weeks, believe me, it will be very clear to the people who are reading it on the selection panel. You might be told by your potential supervisor before you apply that your proposal lacks some strong points and maybe it's a good idea for you to take an extra year in order to prepare your proposal better and then apply for the next year. That's in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, you might be told this after you submit, which is quite a bummer because you can't fix it anymore and you were maybe hoping to advance to the interview round, but you should have taken care of the details in your proposal better. So, what are these details? Of course, the first thing you gotta do is identify the problem and outline it. It might in fact be the most difficult thing to do, or not. It might in fact take a while to kind of brainstorm your ideas and think of how to put the puzzle together, and then it can actually come all together just in a few minutes even. I mean the main outline, not the entire proposal, of course. So think about it very carefully and make sure that the problem is really thought out. Be prepared that some aspects of the problem might be changing when you're proceeding. Be flexible, it's normal. Don't stick to just one thing. You might need to add something, or you might need to just throw some parts out. It's normal. If you are suggested by your potential supervisors that you have to make some changes, go ahead and make those changes and take it seriously. Because first of all, your admission to the next round will depend on what your supervisors will think about the improvement of your proposal, and second, they just have got more experience, they are way smarter than you are, and you gotta listen to them. Now, the next one is outline the structure and make several bullet points for the start. Before you start writing the actual text body, you gotta know what each part of your proposal is gonna be about. And believe me, it's gonna be much easier if you have this built-in skeleton in your file, rather than when you start writing, you'll have to then cut and paste a bunch of paragraphs all over the place in a file that is many pages long. So save yourself some trouble and structure your proposal in a wise way. So structure first, text body second. Look for literature and collect all the relevant literature in a separate bibliography file, not precisely in your proposal file, because you will be making a lot of changes while you're working, and you might end up not using all of the books that you are reading. What I mean by this is that you might have a quote and then, for example, you erase the quote because it's not appropriate in your proposal anymore, let's say, or you had a paraphrase and then you erase it, or maybe you add something new. So in order to not have everything mixed up, you have to have your bibliography in the separate file first while you're working, because then at the end you will only need to add those books that you quoted from directly or you paraphrased, but only the ones that are actually used in the proposal. You might have read 25 more books on the subject, but if you are not directly using the material from these books, you don't need them as your bibliography. Of course, use the same style of the citation, it's needless to say. Stick to one style and just go with it. Because if you start changing the citation style in the middle of your way, you will probably get confused. Personally, I use the Chicago style. I have been doing this since college, that was many years ago, and I have been using it for so many years. Now I'm not gonna change for sure, because I know that if I do, it's gonna be very difficult. It doesn't matter which style you use, as long as you stay consistent. Now let's move on to the most important part of your proposal, the core part, your methodology. The fancy, complicated academic word that stands for the process. How exactly you're gonna do what you claim you're gonna do and how you're gonna evaluate results. So that's pretty much the reason why you are applying for a doctorate. Let's figure it out. You might want to specify whether your methodology is going to be qualitative or quantitative. It's very important because if you are doing a research in which a lot of statistics is involved, you might want to go for a quantitative approach, so you can count out the results and estimate the average and so on. But it is very relevant for performing arts, for example, to do the qualitative approach, because sometimes it's just not possible to collect statistics if you're doing artistic research, for example, and there are not a lot of people involved, so you don't have so much of social interaction going on. And you are studying your own art practice. That sounds like the qualitative approach is gonna be best, but of course it's up to you to determine, because every project is different, everybody's circumstances are different, everybody's goals are different. That's my personal view on it, and I determined it from the proposals I have read this year. But of course it's up to you to decide. Whatever you decide, it must make sense, really. My personal suggestion, don't underestimate this section about methodology. This is the most important part, and it's probably deciding your entire life right now. Because if your methodology is not convincing, you're not getting into your doctorate. Work on this. This is crucial. Also, a side note, if you have something really big going on, describe the financial situation. If you have a theater company of 10 people and you are planning 4 residencies, but you are not specifying in your proposal who is financing it, there will be a big question, and the committee is not going to be sure what to do with you, whether you have funding. If you do, identify this funding and tell them that you have a sponsor, blah blah blah, who is supporting this project, or identify the issue that you are in a financial hardship, your company is, for example, and you are going to look for funding, and describe the ways. If you're going to do fundraising, crowdfunding, if you're going to apply for grants, and from which foundations, if you haven't researched that part. you have to do it. If you leave it empty, it's very likely that this issue is going to trigger some negative marks, and you might not even pass to the interview, because the committee is not going to know how serious you are if you can really pull off a huge project where there are a lot of people involved, but you are not describing how it's all going to be funded. You know, not all the doctoral schools have a possibility to fund everyone's projects. So look into that, and if you're not sure, probably contact your potential supervisors or at least the secretary at the school to figure out what are the best ways to apply for funding through that school. And if there is no way, for example, then you have to specify what paths you are going to take in order to get the money flowing in. The next point, please don't include too much of the me search. It's a research project, right? What do I mean is that if you are asking too many questions about how you are going to proceed, how you are going to execute a project, how you're going to feel, what emotions you're going to have if you're in the arts and you're studying, I don't know, the impact that the art has on your emotions or the emotions of the audience or whatever. So if you are wondering too much about what you are going to do and what consequences the project is going to bring to you, it's probably not the best time for you to write your doctoral proposal. I'm not saying you should really know everything about yourself, because it's impossible, but if you can get a paragraph of those kinds of questions together from your entire text body, it means that it's too much. Probably it's a good idea to take another year to figure out all these questions about yourself and then come back to writing your doctoral exposé. Because in academia, it's very important to bring new knowledge about the subject you're working on, so that this knowledge is going to be beneficial to your peers from the field. To be honest, it's not about your personal views, your personal feelings, your personal approaches. It's about the entire field. You have to be useful, and your project has to be useful to your colleagues. That's pretty much why people are accepted or are not accepted into the academia. And of course, we do ask questions, but these are project-related and field-related questions, mostly, and not so much they are self-related. So please think carefully about what questions are really asked in your exposé. Needless to say, please use academic language. I thought it's not necessary to specify it, but after I have read the 20 proposals earlier this year, I realized that it has to be specified somehow. Wording matters. It really does. Please avoid phrases like, "it would be interesting," or "I think," constantly. "It's impossible to mention that," blah blah blah, right? Instead, please use something like, "I argue this aspect is noteworthy. It is essential to consider. I propose a study on the subject," etc. and so on. And of course, explain why. Now, work stages. This is an important part of your proposal as well, and you should be able to provide an estimate plan of how you are going to work. It doesn't really matter if you write it up as a list or make some kind of a visual timeline, and it doesn't have to be precisely what you write there 100%, because of course things change and there can be cancellations in the team, and now we are living in such unstable times that nobody can guarantee anything. But the committee has to see that you are able to plan. That's the most crucial thing, and that your planning makes sense. Like, for example, if you're going to say that you are going to write your dissertation in the last months before you have to submit it, probably the committee is going to think that something is really off with your planning skills. So of course, plan adequately. Oh, and I'll tell you a secret. It is very rarely that people really complete the program and defend during the minimum required number of semesters. Usually it gets stretched, but you have to write down the minimum number of the semesters, because it's going to be weird if you're applying, for example, for a 3-year program, but you wrote your timeline that is 6 years long, right? Probably not the best thing to do. What else is important? Including the state of the art and your personal experience in the field. It has to be clear that you're familiar with what is going on in your department, let's say. List several examples of the projects that you know. You have to show that you have done some research and perhaps used some of them for the reference. And of course, list your personal experience in the field. You have to show that you have done some work before you have applied to the program and you possess sufficient expertise in order to carry out the project successfully. The next part I want to concentrate on is contacting your potential supervisors. Send your proposal to your potential supervisors in a timely manner. They are all busy. Your proposal is long. They need the time to concentrate on it, to read it. Don't send it to them 2 days before the deadline, please. There are comments going on between supervisors. When somebody sends it late, they're going to mention it during the discussion round. This person sent me the proposal 2 days before the deadline. It's going to be noted. Please don't do that. Give them 2 months or something. Again, my first point, give yourself time. Don't do it last minute. Also, that's going to give you enough time to make edits, because most likely the supervisors are going to suggest to change something or add something. It's quite normal. And you need the time to do that in order to really think about it carefully and make those changes and be ready to submit in a timely manner. If your supervisors will want you to make the edits, it means that they are actually genuinely interested. And if your supervisors are not interested, then probably it's a good idea to look for different supervisors. When you're writing the email to the supervisor, don't write huge long emails. It's better to keep it short. Briefly tell them why you're approaching him or her specifically. Maybe include 1 sentence about their work that interests you, something that they have published or performed. And specify how are they going to be able to help you. So what exactly can they do to guide you? Basically, they need to know how they're going to be helping you, because if they are not sure how to help you out, they are probably going to reject you, not because your proposal is bad or something, but just because there are no relevant points unless they have too much free time. Again, if you got a rejection from a supervisor, you need that extra time to find a new one, so don't do it last minute. Don't plagiarize ever. Obviously. Use citations, footnotes, bibliography, everything must be clear, everything must be referenced to. If the idea is not yours, if you borrowed it from somewhere, you have to cite the source. It's super obvious, but I will just say it so you won't tell me you didn't say it. I did. Don't plagiarize. Amen. Now a couple of words about formatting. I'm showing you my example. So first of all, justify, so the text has to be aligned on the left as well as on the right, and clearly identify the chapters, right? So for example, your goal and your method, these have to be clear. Don't write it as one single huge body of text, because it will be very difficult to read for those who are assessing your exposé. So if you have a table, that's great, but make sure everything is clear. Here I have my methodology still going on. Then I have my work stages. I didn't do any fancy timelines. I just wrote it as a list. And I have the experience state-of-the-art section that I have mentioned already. Yeah, and this is pretty much it. Then I have my bibliography at the end. So make sure that it looks clear. Going backwards now, the titles have to be clear, preferably bold. Some people this year didn't. identify their structure so clearly. It was one huge text and it was not very easy to read actually. So please help those who are gonna assess your proposal. They're gonna thank you. Last but not least, the magic word, proofread. Please proofread everything you have written. Again, I thought it's obvious, but when I was reading the 20 doctoral proposals, I mean, these are not bachelor thesis papers, they are doctoral proposals. Sometimes I just saw horrible mistakes, which means that either the person wasn't careful and probably English was not their first language, or they didn't find someone to proofread their proposal. Listen, if English is not your first language, even if it is, it still makes sense to find someone who is a native speaker, perhaps a philosophy major, perhaps a literature major, a linguist or a philologist who can really professionally take a look at the use of the language. It's really crucial because when there are proposals submitted with mistakes, just proposals, what are those professors in academia gonna think? They need to accept someone who can carry out a huge project that is gonna last several years long. How can they accept a person who can't even write without mistakes? And yes, that's totally normal if it's not your first language, but you gotta find someone who can help you polish it. It must be polished. Your proposal decides your entire life. Your proposal and your dissertation must be polished as crazy. Pay the person if needed, hire somebody, but please don't submit, especially don't submit it if English or whatever language you are gonna be using for your proposal. If that language is not your native language, don't submit it. Find someone who can proofread for you, who can proofread really well, okay? And even if it is your first language, it's still really good to have someone with a professional eye, let's say, who can help you with styling your wording, your phrases, your structure, so they can just look at it with a fresh eye, you know. Performers do run-throughs. We play for our peers. Even when we know for sure what we're gonna do, we are professionals, but we still do run-throughs because we have to be sure and we have to test how it works for ourselves, and we have to get the professional opinion of our peers, of our colleagues. It's the same. Even if you're a literature major, you probably would find another literature major or a linguist or someone to take a look at your big, serious text. Even writers have editors, right? So it is crucial. It is very, very important. You know, there is nothing worse than reading proposals that are written with mistakes. And if they have great ideas, it's even more painful because you don't know if that person is really serious, if they didn't even find anyone to proofread their proposal. It's like, I don't know, I cannot pass that kind of a proposal with mistakes. The committee has to see that you, who is responsible for this entire project, are able to undertake this kind of work. And the first step is, of course, writing and submitting a polished proposal. A big announcement. I'm very happy to say that now I will be providing personal consultations. And if you want me to take a look at your proposal and make suggestions on the structure, on the style, on the methodology, on the problem tackling, all these things, use the link below to sign up. There is a form and I will be happy to work on your exposé for a doctorate program in the arts. Like this video if it was helpful, share it with people who are applying for a doctoral degree in the arts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more info on this subject as well as on artistic research, on the arts and just life philosophy in general sometimes. I will see you in the next video. Stay well. Bye.